Hello, hello.
Oh.
Alright. I'm gonna play my game until, well, even once it starts. But that's what we're gonna have on the stream for a bit.
Did a good job getting him down there, but they got to do a great job gang tackling because this is a guy that can break tackles and turn those types of plays into home runs.
They'll run for it on 3rd and short. On the move at the 30. And a really nice run and pick up there before the defense avoided disaster.
So RFK literally only joined, well, said he's gonna support Trump because Trump said that he would help with medical stuff.
Picks up 6 down to the 22-yard line. 6-yard pickup on 1st down leaves him with 2nd and 4. The run from the shotgun. They'll put the brakes on him at the 21, give him a yard. Already in chip shot field goal range at the 21 with this 3rd and short. They're still thinking touchdown. And the defense holds firm. No
Need to get a first down there.
at all on that play.
Keep the foot on the pedal if you're on offense here. You got that yardage. Yeah, you didn't get the first down, but you've set yourself
Why
up
didn't
now
you?
to go
I am
for
taking
it
the field goal.
and keep this drive alive.
And this
I am
won by a
taking
field
it.
goal.
I only win by a field goal,
Thankfully,
it'd be
I
a bad day.
TSA takes over in the
Well,
If I only win by a field goal, bad day. I'm only playing North Texas.
That's playing a ranked Louisville team, so.
Hey, take your dub as you can.
Oh, yeah.
And I think they'll take it. I got the lead, Palmer. I got the football. I got to take care of the football, put a nice drive together, and just get some kind of points on this drive.
No doubt. Lots to be happy
Ben?
about right now
Got
for
it.
this team. I think for this one, though, on this drive, it's about finding the one-on-one matchups that are in your favor and then exploiting them.
Waiting for it to switch over here in a second. Right here.
Set to snap at time, winding down here in the quarter.
Got 2
Pass
minutes.
on the fly motion.
Oh, go baby, go. Go baby, go. Go kid, go kid, go kid, go.
40. Hit the gas.
I'll run 'em all.
Wide open ahead.
Yes!
Touchdown, UT San Antonio.
Good touchdown.
And they'll put that scoreboard operator to work and put 6 on the board. When that receiver got 3.
Right at the end
I
of the
can't-
first quarter.
I can't. I just readied up. I can't get my my sound to. I'm gonna go from television, and then I'll just watch your stream from my phone and interact that way.
Okay.
Be right back.
Yep, yep, yep.
Get him on the ground with a big running play moves to change for the first down. He's up to 57 yards on the ground so far in this one, and he is closing in on that 1,000-yard mark.
I know it's sexy to throw the football, but if you can pound it away and get these kind of gains, they will just add up. Where the defense
I gotta be starting
down,
here soon.
get first downs, and ultimately get some points.
He locked up and held on to bring him down.
How about the defender being a heat-seeking missile? He was on radar lock. He found the football and flew down with some bad intentions.
Shotgun snap, wants to throw it on third. Fires to the tight end. They've got it inside the 30. They'll mark it at the 28. It's first down. The Roadrunners are flying down the field.
This play just said
From the
that
gun, the running back has it.
Kamala was endorsed by Dick Cheney.
Yeah.
And chunk plays are the name
That's
of
not
the
somebody
game.
you would be
Get one
endorsed
here
by.
before the defense
No.
finally makes the stop.
And the only reason he's endorsing her even is because his daughter endorsed him, or endorsed her. Liz Cheney is like lost her mind.
This man, you will have success, especially in the red zone.
Here we go.
Drawing after his last debate, Donald Trump now up against a new opponent.
The candidates separated by the smallest of margins, essentially tied in the polls nationally and in the key battlegrounds, including right here in Pennsylvania, all still very much in play. The ABC News presidential debate starts right now.
This is an ABC News special. The most consequential moment of this campaign. Kamala Harris.
Together, we will chart a new way forward.
Oh, let's see how this goes, huh?
soon be a great nation again.
Face to face. Historic. The ABC News
It's
presidential
gonna be the only
debate.
debate. It's gotta be.
Here now, David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
Good evening, I'm David Muir, and thank you for joining us for tonight's ABC News presidential
get my
debate. We want to
headset and
welcome
listen
viewers
to it.
watching on
Good.
ABC and around the world tonight. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump are just moments away from taking the stage in this unprecedented race for president.
And I'm Lindsay Davis. Tonight's meeting could be the most consequential event
ask
of their
hard questions.
campaigns, with
That's
Election
all I'm
Day
asking.
now less than 2 months away. For Vice President Kamala Harris, this is her first debate since President Biden withdrew from the race on July 21st. Of course, that decision followed his debate against President Donald Trump in June. Since then,
Everybody
this race
knows
has taken on
what
an
Trump is.
entirely new dynamic.
People
And that
need to
brings
know
us
what
to the rules of
Kamala
tonight's
is.
debate. 90 minutes with 2 commercial
I pay
breaks. No
attention. I
topics
follow
or
her pretty
questions have been
closely.
shared with the
She's
campaigns.
absolutely crazy.
The candidates will have 2 minutes to answer questions, and this is the clock.
Backtracks on
That's what
literally
they'll
everything.
be seeing. 2 minutes for rebuttals and 1 minute for follow-ups, clarifications, or responses. Their microphones will only be turned on when it's their turn to speak. No pre-written
That
notes
helps.
allowed. There is no
Trump.
audience here tonight in this
Like
hall
Kamala
at the
wanted to get
National
him
Constitution Center. This is an intimate setting for two candidates who have never met.
President Trump won the coin toss. He chose to deliver the final closing statement of the evening. Vice President Harris selected the podium to the right.
So let's now welcome the candidates to the stage. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump.
This is the first time they met, too.
Kamala Harris. Let's have a good debate.
Nice to see you. Have fun.
Thank you.
See ya. Have
Welcome to you
fun.
both. It's wonderful to have you. It's an honor to have you both here tonight.
No dick
Good
for
evening.
Kamala
We are
Harris.
looking forward to a spirited and thoughtful debate.
So let's get started. I want to begin tonight with the issue that voters repeatedly say is their number one issue, and that is the economy and the cost of living in this country. Vice President Harris, you and President Trump were elected 4 years ago, and your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago?
No.
When it comes to the
we're
economy,
not.
do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid. And
Nobody
I am
cares.
actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America.
What's the plan?
I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing, and the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My passion, one of them, is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner.
Nobody cares.
I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to start up small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit. My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year because of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because there was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like
America
very few
first,
people
baby.
have ever seen before.
Trump,
Probably the worst in our nation's history.
I mean, I know we have your record.
We were
from
at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago.
This has been a
disaster
for
people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums. And they're coming in and they're taking
right now we're talking about the
jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans and Hispanics and also unions. Unions are going to be affected very soon. And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield, Ohio. You look at Aurora in Colorado. They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people that she and Biden led into our country. And they're destroying our country. They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of criminality, and we have to get them out. We have to get them out fast. I created one of the greatest economies in the history of our country. I'll do it again and even better.
We are going to get to immigration and border security during this debate, but I would like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy here.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression.
Please bring up
Donald
because
Trump
of COVID.
left us the worst public health
President
epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all, in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances, and name-calling.
Oh, there she goes. She's already starting it.
Is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us. And I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad. but it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic. And the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million people died.
That's how you rebut
Has there
that.
been
Very
anything
good.
like it? We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns. We got masks. We did
Ventilators didn't
things
help,
that
though.
nobody
Neither
thought
did the masks.
possible. And people give me credit for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce-back jobs. These were jobs bounced back, and it bounced back, and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
That's true.
So Donald Trump has no plan for you. And
just
when
said-
you look at his economic plan, it's all
Anybody
about
else
tax
miss
breaks
his
for the richest
cutting
people.
taxes?
I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said
So why don't you
is
do
that
it now?
Donald Trump's plan
So why don't you
would
do
make
it
the
now?
economy worse. Mine would strengthen the economy.
We've got 4 years of proof
Wharton
that his
School
works.
has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You
No,
just
we're
have
already in
to
a
look
recession.
at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself
He just
than
talked
he
about
is
his
in
plan.
looking out for you.
It's just a soundbite. They gave her that to say. Look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go
Tax
and
cuts
work
help the middle
and,
class, which then
create
circulates the
jobs and
economy,
create a
which
lot
then
of
lowers inflation.
good, solid money
Well,
for
helps to
our,
lower inflation,
for our
but doesn't
country.
completely lower
And
it.
just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's
not.
plan.
That's
And it's
correct.
like 4
Copy and pasted it
sentences,
on her website.
Like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up. The Vice President brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this, because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher
if we
prices on
start making
gas,
stuff in America.
food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have and who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But
That's
those
correct.
tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration. We are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country, because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response.
lived in
You heard what
both.
the president said there, because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is, under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out. when a policy about China should
Never heard
be
of that.
in making sure the United
I'm saying
States of
she's wrong, but I've not
America
heard
wins
that.
the competition for the 21st century, which means focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships with our allies, focusing on investing in American-based technology so
Don't
that
help our
we
allies.
win the race on
You keep going
AI
after
and
Israel for no
quantum
reason.
computing, focusing on what we need to do to support America's workforce so that we don't end up having on the short end of the stick in terms of workers' rights. But what Donald Trump did, let's talk about this, with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. Thank you, President Xi, exclamation point, when we know that Xi was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
Oh, so now you're saying he did have the
First of
origins
all,
of it.
they bought their chips from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of
That's correct. We don't.
philosophies like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever
That's
got elected,
correct.
she'd change
He
it.
was the first one to
And
call it the China
it
virus. And
will
they said,
be
it
the
didn't
end
come
of
from
our
China.
country. She's a
Yes, it
Marxist.
did. Came from
Everybody
a lab.
knows she's a Marxist. Her father's a Marxist professor in economics, and he taught
is.
her well. But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, where it's, I believe, 21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals. And that's bad for our economy, too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have, and she has,
What else? We
destroyed
need to lower
our
government
country
funding,
with
which would
policy that's
help take away
insane.
inflation.
Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
President Trump, thank you. Lindsay?
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President Trump, you've often
He's
touted
gonna
that you
lose
were
on this
able to
one,
kill
although he
Roe
has
v.
the most
Wade.
moderate view.
Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in American history. Then last month, you said
He's
that your
certainly not the most
administration
pro-life
would be
president in
great for
American
women
history.
and their
That's not true.
reproductive
That's a
rights.
lie.
In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks. But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of aboltion because you've
the
changed
moderator
your
just
position
hammered
so
him on
many
switching,
times.
which he should.
Therefore, why should
let's
they
see if
trust
they
you?
So the
do it
reason
to
I'm
her.
doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, who's doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words,
did
we'll
say that.
execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because that
You can't
predominates.
nod your head
because
no,
they're
shake your head
radical.
no.
The
He did
Democrats
say
are
it. It's
radical
on-
in that.
it's on
and
film.
her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says
He did say that.
execution after birth. It's an execution, no longer abortion, because
I
the
don't know if
baby
he
is
said that.
born. Is okay.
No, I agree
and
with
that's
that
not
it's an
okay with me.
execution, but
Hence
I
the
don't know
vote.
if that's what he
But
said.
what I did is something for 52 years. They've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do. Exceptions. Very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our
He's
country
nodding her head
apart
no, but he's
for
not wrong.
52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this
thing-
issue to be brought back to the states where the
That's the
people
part
could
that
vote.
I don't know
And that's what
how
happened.
true that is.
Happened. Now,
I don't
Ohio,
think liberals wanted it back
the
to the
vote was
states.
somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was
The vote was
somewhat
liberal in
liberal, much
Ohio
more
because the
liberal than
older people
would
didn't know
have
what they
thought.
were voting
but
for.
each individual state is voting.
I know that from
It's
people
the
who
vote
I know
of the
that work in
people
poll
now. It's
booths.
not tied up in the federal government.
That's the only
I did
reason
a
it
great
passed in
service in
Ohio,
doing it. It took
because they
courage to do
worded
it.
it
And the
so
Supreme
confusingly.
Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam
Yes, we
Vice
know
President, I
that.
want to get your response
But that's
to
not what he
President
said.
Trump.
Well,
He
as
said
I
that's
said,
what
you're going to
the-
hear a bunch of
he
lies,
passed,
and that's not
the Virginia
actually a
governor said.
surprising fact. Let's understand how we got
so
here.
this is certainly not going to be called
Donald
down the middle.
Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they
Actually,
did
that was not his
exactly
intention.
as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal
How's that a Trump
for
abortion
a
ban? He didn't
doctor
pass
or
the
nurse to
legislation.
provide health care. In one state, it provides
Abortion's not
prison
healthcare.
for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which
That's not
understand
true.
what that means. A survivor of a crime of violation to their body
That's not
does
true.
not
She's
have
lying.
the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is
That's not true.
immoral.
That's not
And
true.
one
Every
does
state
not
has
have
that.
to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women
But
around
it's not
our
her body.
country.
It's the
You
baby's
want to
body.
talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that.
Bleeding out in a car in a
A
parking
12
lot.
or 13-year-old survivor of incest being
Did it do it
forced to
herself?
carry a pregnancy to term. They don't want that.
Think that
And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand,
No, he
in his
won't.
Project
He didn't do it the first time.
2025, there would be a national
He's already said
abortion
he's not for
monitor
Project
that would be
2025.
monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages.
That's
I
not
think the
correct.
American people believe that certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, should not be made by the government.
Thank
He's
you,
already lying
Vice
about-
President Harris.
Well, there she goes again. It's a lie. I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats,
states.
Republicans, and everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the
'Cause it
states.
should be a
And the
state
states
issue.
are voting.
But the states vote
And it
on it.
may take a little time, but for 52 years, this issue has torn our country apart.
Mm-hmm.
And they've wanted it back in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible. The states are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it
Well,
came
I
to your
won't
desk?
have to because, again, two things. Number one, she said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50 and essentially 50-50 in both Senate
Answer
and the
the
House.
question, Donald.
She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So it's just talk. You know what it reminds me of when they said they're going to get student loans terminated,
Stop
and
the
it
word
ended up
salad,
being
dude.
a
Answer the
total
question.
catastrophe. The student loans, and then her, I think probably her boss, if you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach. But look, her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. And he went out,
But
got
he's not
rejected
asking-
again
the
by the
question's not
Supreme
about
Court.
that.
So all these students got taunted with this whole thing about this whole idea. And how unfair that would have been. Part of the
You gotta
reason
stay on
they
topic
lost
here, buddy.
to the millions and millions of
This is-
people that
this
had
is
to
why
pay
you're gonna
off their
lose on this
student
topic
loans.
right here.
They didn't get it for free.
Not because
but
your
they were saying
policies are
it's the
worse, it's
same way
because
that
you
they
can't
talked
stay on
about that,
topic.
that they talk about abortion.
You follow the
But if I
rabbit
could
hole.
just get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all fairness, J.D. And I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me. But I really didn't. Look, we don't have to discuss it because she'd never be able to get it, just like she couldn't get student
she's
loans. They
asking
couldn't
about
get student
you.
loans. They didn't even come close to getting student loans. They taunted young people and a lot of other people that had loans. They can never get this approved. So
Just
it doesn't
answer-
matter what
answer
she
the
says
question.
about going to Congress. Well, wonderful. Let's go to Congress. Do it. But the fact is that for years they wanted to get it out of Congress and out of the federal government, and we did something that everybody said couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
Vice President Harris, I want to give you your time to respond, but I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade. And as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans.
It does happen.
Couples who pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments.
That's not true.
What is happening in our country? Working people, working women
That's not true.
who are working 1 or 2 jobs, who can barely afford childcare as it is,
You know why nobody's getting
have to
IVF
travel
treatments?
to
Because
another
people
state
can't afford it.
to get on a plane sitting next to strangers to go and get the health care she needs. Barely can afford to do it, and what you are putting her through is unconscionable. And the people of America have not, the majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body, and that is why in every state where this issue has been on the ballot, in red and blue states both, the people of America have voted for freedom.
About how I figured it would go.
Vice President Harris,
Excuse me, I have to respond. Another lie. It's another lie.
That's true.
I have been a leader on IVF, which is fertilization. The IVF, I have been a leader. In fact, when they got a very negative decision on IVF from the Alabama courts, I saw the people of Alabama and the legislature 2 days later voted it in. Yep. I've been a leader on it. They know that, and everybody else knows it. I have been a leader on fertilization,
people aren't getting
IVF.
it because it's too expensive.
And the other thing, you should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that? Why don't you answer that question?
Why don't you answer the question? Would you
because
veto?
Under Roe v. Wade,
answer the question. Would you veto?
You could do abortions in the 7th month, the 8th month, the 9th month,
not true.
and probably after birth. Just look at the former governor of Virginia. The governor of Virginia said, we put the baby aside, and then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
President Trump, thank you.
We're going to turn now to immigration and border security. We know it's an issue that's important to Republicans, Democrats, voters across the board in this country. Vice President Harris, you were tasked by President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America. We know that illegal border crossings reached a record high in the Biden administration. This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly. But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act?
Significantly
And would you
is a
have done
stretch.
anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings.
You literally handpicked who you wanted to go to prison.
And let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill, which I supported. And that bill would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to help those folks who are working there right now overtime trying to do their job.
You have the executive power to do it.
It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are so many families watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country.
If it was just a border bill, it would have passed.
Would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress, and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And understand, this comes at a time where the people of our country actually need a leader who engages in solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first, and I pledge to you that I will.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so? That would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border.
First, let me respond as to the rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there. And then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation.
I know,
and it
answer this
happened
question.
3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs.
No,
the people that came
true.
in. They're eating the cats.
That's not true.
They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase, make America great again.
I can't believe
she's destroying this country. And if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, we'll end up being Venezuela.
I don't think she's doing a good job. I think she's winning.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is the
people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
television. But the people on television saying their dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
If it comes back to be true, that guy's going to look rough.
You know, this is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney.
What does that have to do with anything?
And if you want to really know the inside track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already, just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of staff, a four-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit.
Wasn't it the general?
His former secretary of defense has said the nation, the republic, would never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond here.
Thank you, because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people. Not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people who's were just killed, viciously and violently killed. And I got to know the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper. He was no good. I fired him. So he writes a book. Another one writes a book. Because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they. But they have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far. In fact, I got more votes than any president, sitting president, in history by far.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier, so let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S. military. You also said you would use local police.
Running mate
how would you
the legal requirement
deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah. It is much higher.
So the moderators
because
lied.
Of
Kamala
them.
lied.
They allowed criminals, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers to come into our country, and they're now in the United States
and they're not
told
hammering her to answer the question,
their
which
countries
is
like
worse.
Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes. But it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in. And all over the world, crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof, despite their fraudulent statements that they made.
He shakes her
crime
head
in this country is
everything
through
that he
the
says is
roof.
true.
And we have
The
a
thing
new
that he
form
actually
of
answers
crime. It's
correctly.
called migrant crime, and it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But Vice
Excuse me,
President
the
Harris,
FBI they were defrauding statements. They
That's
didn't
true.
include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud, just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
That is
President
also
Trump,
a
thank
fraud.
you. I'll
That
let you
is-
respond, Vice President Harris.
Well, I think
It's
this
not
is
new
so
jobs.
rich.
It's
Coming from
jobs coming
someone
back
who
from
has been
COVID.
prosecuted
there
for
she goes.
national security crimes, economic crimes, election
same thing.
interference.
Actually, that's not what he got
has
prosecuted
been found
for.
liable for sexual assault, and his next big
He didn't get,
court appearance
liable for
is in
that.
November at his own criminal sentencing. And let's be clear where each person stands on the issue of what is important about respect for the rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about
This is a
what is
lady who wanted
important
to
in
defund the
this
police
race. It is
and pay for
important that we
everybody
move
that
forward,
burned down
that
Wisconsin.
we turn the page on this same old tired
It's Trump
rhetoric
versus
and
Harris and the
address
moderators tonight,
the needs
everybody.
of the American people, address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan for, address what we must do to support
Trump
our
needs to
small
call out
businesses,
the moderators,
address
'cause it's
bringing
bad.
down the price
Real
of
bad.
groceries. But frankly, the American people are exhausted with this same old tired playbook.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
Excuse me. Every one of those cases was started by them against their political opponent.
That is
And
true.
I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the DA in New York, every one of those cases. And then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out.
Yep.
It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election. They're fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. Understand, this is someone who has openly said he would terminate, I'm quoting, terminate the Constitution of the United States, that he would weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies, someone who has openly expressed disdain for members of our military. Understand what it would mean if Donald Trump were back in the White House with no guardrails, because certainly we know now the court won't stop him.
Hey,
we
by the
know
way-
J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people.
Vice President
stop
Harris,
him.
thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President
Yeah,
Harris,
very
in your
good.
last run for president.
We got to
This is the
continue
one
here.
that weaponized, not me. She weaponized. I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy with a
President
fake Russia investigation
So they are
that
eating the
went
pets
nowhere.
We
in
have a lot to
Springfield,
get to,
Ohio.
Lindsay.
Vice
And there
President
is
Harris,
evidence.
in your last run for president, you said you wanted to ban fracking.
I just reposted
now
it
you
on
don't.
X.
You wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss every one of the, at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States. And in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is that we have got to invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our
Moderators haven't
reliance on
fact-checked her
foreign oil.
one time.
We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised by a hardworking mother
Nobody cares about that.
worked and saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager.
Great. Good
The
for
values
them.
I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my work to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase 3 million homes, increase by 3 million homes by the end of my first term. My work that is related to having a friend when I was in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And my focus then on protecting women and children from violent crime is based on a value that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable. My work that is about protecting Social Security and Medicare is based on long-standing work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down and name-calling. The true measure of the leader is the leader who actually understands the strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
President Trump, your
Well,
response?
first of all, I wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great father, and I learned a lot from him. But I was given a fraction of that, a tiny fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars, many, many billions. And when people see it, they are even surprised. So we don't have to talk about that. Fracking, she's been against it for 12 years. Defund the police. She's been against that forever. She gave all that
You
stuff
are
up
for defunding the
very
police. You've said
wrongly,
it.
very horribly.
Oh, boy.
And everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out. Wait a minute. I'm talking now. If you don't mind, please.
Does
that sound familiar?
I'm speaking. He just did it to her.
She went out.
That's so funny.
She
He
went
did
out
her gimmick
in
just to do
Minnesota
it.
and wanted to let criminals
He's
that
such a
killed
troll.
people, that burned down Minneapolis. She went out and raised money to get them out of jail. She did things that nobody would ever think of.
The tweets are
now
there.
she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical
I don't
left
know if that's true.
liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish one thing, so important in my opinion. So I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before. When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher, because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice, because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead, fossil fuel will be dead. We'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out of it. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar, but they take...
But you can't...
400, 500 acres of desert
President
soil.
Trump, we have a
These
lot
are
of
not good
issues
things
that we
for the
have to get to.
environment,
We're
as she
out of time.
understands.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you. We have an election in just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them. The country and the world saw what played out at the Capitol that day. The officers
Are you going to ignore the fact that he said to do it peacefully?
Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret
He didn't
about
say
what
anything
you did
about
on that day?
how he said do it
You
peacefully.
just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically. I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar. Remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning,
cities that were burning
I'm
down
surprised you're
during-
not talking about
when
the
she
border
was-
yet.
when they
That's
were running it,
because
that she wanted to
she
bail
knows what a
everybody out.
bad job they've done. What about those people? When are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America? They're coming in from all over the world, David, all over the world. And crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
But let me just
when
ask
are those, David,
Oh, here
when are
he
those
goes.
people going to be
Stepping
prosecuted?
in for her.
When are the people
Trying
that
to
burned
save
down
her.
Minneapolis
He's
going to be
trying. He's doing
prosecuted?
his job.
Or in Seattle? They went into Seattle. They took over a big percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted?
But let me just ask
You might ask her that question.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election.
answered your question.
Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes or no?
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big.
That's
I
him
went to
saying no.
Nancy Pelosi
He
and the
answered your
mayor
question.
of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, you know, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi
Kamala
rejected
Harris
me.
looks
It
like
was
you just got off the
2 weeks ago.
Mayflower.
Her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened.
That's funny.
They
That's
want
one
to
of the
get rid
funniest
of
things
that
I've seen
tape.
all day.
It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi. But I do want Vice President Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol
These
on January
moderators are
6th.
awful.
I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the president of the United States incited
She's
a
not going to
violent
answer the
mob
question. Yep, there it is.
to attack our nation's capital,
Now she's going to give a sob story
to
of how
desecrate
she
our
felt
nation's
so
capital. On
endangered
that day,
with armed guards.
140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died.
One
And understand, the former
aware of.
president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there
That's
was
already been
a mob of
debunked.
people carrying tiki
How many
torches,
times?
spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side.
Yes, so
Let's
guess what side
remember
he's not talking about that were the fine
when
people.
it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, The president said, the former president said, stand back and stand by.
You
So
meant
for
say stand
everyone
by.
watching
You
who
all-
remembers what
everybody knows
January
that.
6th was, I say we don't have to go back. Let's not
She's
go
the
back.
worst
We're not going
debater
back.
I've ever heard
it's
in my
time to
life.
turn the page.
Go back. You
And
can't
if
go
that
back in
was a
time.
bridge too
It's
far for
impossible.
you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for
boy.
country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is
You've had
about
3
attacking
years.
the
Trump, just
foundations
say,
of our
why
democracy
don't you do it
because you
now?
don't like
That's all you
the
gotta say.
outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking. Let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back. Let's chart a course for the future and not go backwards to the past.
Let me just follow up here.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say, debunked. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Jesse, all of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this. You talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border? How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do, and I would be very proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her sign a bill to close up the border. Because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The president of the United States, you'll get him out of bed. You'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You'll say, come on down to the office. Let's sign a bill. If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President,
people are killing many people, unlike J6.
We talked immigration here tonight. I do want to focus on this next issue to both of you because it really brings us this into focus, truth in these times that we're living in. Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say
sarcastically.
that.
You know that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it. And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten. I was told if I got 63, which was what I got in 2016, you can't be beaten. The election, people should never be thinking about an election as fraudulent. We need two things. We need walls, and we have to have it. We have to have borders, and we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
That's why I did watch
all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them
no judge looked at it
and said
they
there was
said
no
we didn't have
widespread fraud.
standing. That's the other thing. They said we didn't have standing, a
this
technicality.
Guy is the
Can you
worst
imagine
moderator. He's not even a moderator.
Where a person in an election doesn't have standing? The president of the United States doesn't have standing. That's how we lost. If you look at the facts, and I'd love to have you'll do a special on it. I'll show you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show
literally is a disgrace.
We have so many facts
Remember,
and
Democrats
statistics.
have held that office 12 of the last 16 years.
Because we have to solve the problem that we have right now. That's old news. And the problem that we have right now is we have a nation in decline. and
they
they have
haven't
put it into
fact-checked her on
decline.
Project
We have a
25. They didn't
nation
fact
that
check
is
her on the
dying,
IVF.
David.
Mr. President, thank you.
Haven't fact
Vice
checked
President
her
Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by whiskers. So he still believes he did not lose the election that was won by President Biden and yourself. But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences.
ABC is looking.
One of your campaign's top lawyers responded
good.
saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump.
They also didn't
I
bring
have
up
talked with
the fact check
military
on
leaders,
Charlottesville.
some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace. And when you then talk in this way,
Trump is debating the
in a
moderators,
presidential
not
debate,
Kamala.
and deny,
It literally came into an attack.
over and over again, our court cases
It's
you have
3-on-1.
lost because you did, in fact, lose that election. It leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the
Can you
ability
imagine
to not be
what
confused
the headlines would be if it was reversed?
about
If it was Trump and two moderators
That's
versus
deeply
Kamala?
troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond.
She would fall over
Let me
the
just
place.
say about world
Then
leaders.
The media reply
Viktor
would be
Orban, one of the most
it would be an outcry.
respected men. They call him a strong man. He's a
All
tough
Kamala
person.
does is copy and paste
Smart.
Joseph Biden.
Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago, it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one, but he ended the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline in our country, he ended that. But he let the Russians build a pipeline
By the
going
way,
all over
I have a
Europe and
picture
heading into Germany, the biggest
For how in
pipeline
pregnancy
in
abortion
the
is
world.
legal.
Look,
From her, at the
Viktor
beginning of this
Orban
thing.
said
8
it.
states.
He said
no
the most
defined
respected,
limit.
most
Though
feared
she has been
person
fact-checked wrong
is
again.
Donald
The
Trump.
gray is the no
We
defined
had
limit.
no problems when Trump was president, but when this weak, pathetic man that you
So once
saw
again,
at a
he
debate
lied.
just a few months ago, that
The
if he weren't
moderators
in
didn't
that
fact-check her.
debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14
We're at the
million
brink of
votes.
World
What you
War III,
did,
and they're
you
talking about
talk about a
January
threat to
6th.
democracy. He got 14 million votes, and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But he got
President.
14 million votes. They threw him out. She got 0 votes. And when she ran, she was the first one to leave because she failed. And now she's running. I don't understand it, but
Mr.
I'm
President,
okay with it
Mr.
because
President, your time is
I
up.
think we're
Thank
going to
you.
do very well.
We've got a lot more to get to.
Turning now
Yes.
to the Israel-Hamas war and the hostages who are still being held, Americans
This,
among
all
them.
he has to say is,
Vice
why don't you
President
do it
Harris
now?
in
Why don't you do
December,
it now?
you said, quote, Israel has a right to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians.
They're
you said
only
that 9
statistically
months ago. Now an
doing it
estimated
the best they
40,000
possibly can.
Palestinians are dead. Nearly
That's not
100
true.
hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis.
That is correct.
Many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Because it is also true, far
don't think
too
so.
many innocent Palestinians have been killed.
Look
Children,
at the stats
mothers.
on that.
What we know is that this
Next to no
war
civilian life
must
has been
end.
has been lost.
It must end
from them.
immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages
Ceasefire
out.
deal won't work, but how are you
And
going to...
so we will continue
Question
to
is
work
how?
around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a
I can work
course
around
for a
the
two-state
clock on
solution.
lesson planning
And in that
for school, but if I don't
solution,
put pen to
there
paper,
must
it doesn't
be
matter.
security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you
Palestine's not even a real
always,
country.
I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel.
Can you just give
but we
millions
must
of dollars
have a
and nukes
two-state
to Iran?
solution where we can rebuild
Iran
Gaza,
does have nukes
where the
because of you.
Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu?
You're not gonna ask her
and
to
also
answer the
Hamas
question?
in
Because
order
she
to
didn't
get the
answer the
hostages
question.
out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine
Now
and
answer
killed
the question.
millions of people
So
when
how are
you
you
add
gonna
it
end
up. Far worse than people understand what's
These two
going on
strengths,
over
but how are
there.
you going to end it?
But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu
He did
when
not.
he went
That's
to
true.
Congress to
He
make a
dodged
very
him.
important speech.
That's
She
true.
refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers.
Correct.
She wanted to go to the sorority party.
That's
She
true.
hates Israel. If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty
that's
good at
not true. That's not
predictions,
even-
and I
that's
hope
not
I'm wrong
biblically
about
accurate.
that one. She hates Israel. At the same time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs,
well.
Jewish people, Israel will be gone. It would have never happened. Iran was broke under Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions
So
that I
he's gonna
had.
say that he's gonna
Iran had
sanction
no
them,
money for Hamas or
bankrupt them.
Hezbollah or any of the 28
That's how he's
different
going to end it.
spheres
But he needs
of
to
terror.
phrase it that
and they
way,
are spheres
especially
of terror.
especially to these
Horrible terror.
moderators.
They had no money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had
Oh,
no
he comment-
money for terror. They were broke. Now they're
applauded
a
him?
rich nation, and now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at
I
what's
don't know
happening
if I would have
with the
applauded him at all.
Houthis and
This guy's been
Yemen.
terrible.
Look at what's going on in the Middle East. This would have never happened. I will get that settled and fast, and I'll get the war with Ukraine and Russia ended. If I'm president-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming president.
Vice President Harris, he says you hate Israel.
That's absolutely not true. I have my entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people. He knows that. He's trying to, again, divide
Well, you sided with Rashida
and
Tlaib a whole lot,
distract
and she does
from
hate
the
Israel.
reality, which is it is very well known that Donald Trump is weak and wrong on national security and foreign policy. It
that's
is
not how
well
you wanna hit
known
him.
that he admires dictators.
Actually, the
wants
well-known
to
is
be
the
a
opposite.
dictator on day one, according to himself.
No.
It is well known that he said of Putin that he can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is
No.
well known
Well,
that he said when Russia
not
went
how
into
he's-
Ukraine,
okay.
it
He
was
said it, but that's not how he
brilliant.
meant.
It is well known he exchanged
He's saying it was
love
smart
letters
because he
with
knew you
Kim
wouldn't do anything.
Jong-un, and it is
Jong-un.
absolutely well known
Can't even say
that
his name
these
right. That's
dictators
racist.
and autocrats
You can't
are
say his name
rooting
right.
for you to be president again because they're so clear. They can manipulate you with flattery
endorse Kamala
and
Harris.
favors. And that is why
Trump, if you
so
don't say
many
Putin
military
endorsed Kamala
leaders
Harris,
who you have
you missed
worked
it
with
because
have
he
told
endorsed
me
Kamala Harris.
you are a disgrace. That is why we understand that we have to have a president who is not consistently
Did Kamala dress
weak
for her own funeral?
and wrong on
Vice
national
President
security,
Harris.
including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest
Was she
regard
about
our
to tell the
military.
Vice
moderators who are
President Harris,
interrupting her?
thank you.
They're the ones, and she's the one that caused it, that's weak on national security by
That is true.
allowing every nation last
Tell
month for the
the
year,
truth that Putin
168
endorsed Kamala
different
Harris.
countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way down. Putin endorsed her last week,
There it is.
said, I hope
Yes,
she
sir.
wins. And I think he meant it because what he's gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me.
There it is.
The
Nicely
leaders
done.
of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world, going to Germany and all over Europe? Because they're weak and they're ineffective. And Biden, by the way,
President
gets paid
Trump,
a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic ABC News presidential debate from the National Constitution Center right here in Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
Oh, boy. That is certainly something that's happening at the moment. How are we feeling? Weak and ineffective. She is weak and ineffective. She is. He's not wrong about that. I feel like ever since he got done, I feel like the only thing he kind of took the bait on and ran with was his, talking about his rallies. I feel like they both kind of sluggish. They were sluggish out of the gate. She was built in 2021. You know, it's not even like we're exporting or, you know, pumping oil pretty decently according to stats, but it's not just about that to make the money. Pretty sure Keystone's still close too. You know, I'm glad that he said that Putin endorsed her. He needed to say that right off rip. He lost $2 billion. Yeah, I still owe the government, you know, $500, but you know they're gonna hound me for it. But they lost $2 billion. They don't give a flip. All they do is launder money. You're right. It's disgusting. To be fair, Trump spends too much money as well. That's what I kind of hope if he wins that RFK kind of helps it well. RFK is going to go after medical. Elon Musk will help with money. The FBI kind of needs to go. The FBI is just so corrupt anymore. The FBI doesn't even believe their own statistics half the time. Trump, see, I had hope that this would go kind of like the CNN one went, where the moderators were actually fairly good. I thought they did a good job. This is not a good job down the middle. This is horrible. And they're going 2-on-1. I think Trump's holding his own considering it's 3-on-1, but he can fix everything, just can't say how. You know, that's what I don't understand. Is that they're literally telling him or asking him, answer the question, tell me how. She answers, and they don't go after her. They don't say, tell me how. They don't say how you're going to do it. They just take the answer, and there they go. The moderator literally fact-checked Donald Trump's tone. I didn't sense the sarcasm in it. Like, dude, what? Oh, my gosh. It's just a crap show. Yes. This is a good tweet. It was gracious of the moderators to give Kamala a chance to participate in this debate. They only took over after she proved she couldn't, which was at the beginning of the debate. the lady moderator, Kamala, tell us just how bad, mean, and orange is Donald Trump. That was basically her question. Oh my goodness, that's so funny. It's so funny. Kamala's just the worst, man. You know, we're an hour in, hour and 6 minutes in, 5 minutes in. She has not been fact-checked one time. Not once. And she's certainly not telling the truth. I pulled up a few things that I've found real quick. She's losing so badly in the polls. They're trying to set it up where everything Trump says is a lie. Everything she says is true. And that's how they're going to try to get her back in the polls. And it's not working. At least five. January 6th. The nice, good people on both sides of Charlottesville. What else? I mean, there's quite a few. I can't remember what they've gone over half the time. Pretty bad. The debate summed up. ABC moderators to Trump, you're horrible. Do you regret being horrible? ABC moderators to Kamala, what is your response to Trump being horrible? Oh yeah, all his cases, yep, they've all been thrown out for the most part, except for one. And it's not even about the documents; it's about Stormy Daniels. So he's wrong on that one. Oh, here we go. Let's see if they fix this. Huh?
Welcome back to this historic ABC News presidential debate tonight. We're going to continue here, and I want to turn to the war in Ukraine. We're now 2.5 years into this conflict. Mr. President, it has been the position of the Biden administration that we must defend Ukraine from Russia, from Vladimir Putin, to defend their sovereignty, their democracy, that it's in America's best interest to do so, arguing that if Putin wins, he may be emboldened to move even further into other countries. You have said you would solve this war in 24 hours. You said so just before the break tonight. How exactly would you do that? And I want to ask you a very simple question tonight. Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives
That's the best answer.
that are being uselessly, people being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers. Look, we're in for $250 billion
everybody
or more.
Wins.
Because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are.
That's correct. They're
in
closer.
for $150 billion less because Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said, either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't like me as much as they like weak people. But you take a look at what's happening. We're in for 250 to 275 billion. They're into 100 to 150. They should be forced to equalize. With that being said, I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect
they do respect
your president. Him. Okay, they respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin. Hasn't spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell. But after I left, when I saw him building up soldiers, he did it after I left. I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't even know if he's... Where is our president? We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify
they threw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even know. Is he our president? But we have a president,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's alive.
All right, now,
your time is up.
He's not
just
wrong.
to clarify in the question, do you believe it's in the U.S. best interests for Ukraine to win this war? Yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
All right.
Negotiate a deal, because we have to stop all of these human lives
from
being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on support for Ukraine in this moment, but also as Commander-in-Chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me. I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened
the 4 years that he was there.
I actually met with Zelensky a few days before Russia
I'm pretty sure you dipped on
invaded,
Zelensky.
tried through force to change territorial boundaries, to defy one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I met with President Zelensky. I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself. Days later, I went to NATO's eastern flank, to Poland and Romania. And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense. And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition,
They're
the
all the same.
artillery,
They're all the same
the
arm.
javelins,
They're all the
the
same.
Abrams tanks that we have
just
provided.
going farther
Ukraine
and farther
stands
left.
as an independent and free
And she's the
country.
most left.
If
She's
Donald
left
Trump were
even
president,
more so than-
Putin would be
than,
sitting in Kyiv right
Bernie
now.
Sanders.
And understand what that would mean, because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president.
That's not true.
And that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance
they
the
might
world
be
has ever
glad that
known,
you're
which is NATO.
in
And what we have
office
done
because now they're not
to
having to worry about
preserve
paying more.
the ability of Zelensky and the
for
Ukrainians
safety
to fight
reasons,
for their independence. Otherwise,
our allies would
Putin
prefer
would be sitting in
Trump would be
Kyiv
there.
with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch.
Well,
Vice President Harris, thank you. We've heard from both of you on Ukraine tonight. Afghanistan came up in the last hour. I wanted her to respond to something you said earlier, and please, I'll give you a minute here.
Putin would be sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow. Quiet, please. He would have been sitting in Moscow, much happier than he is right now. But eventually, you know, he's got a thing that other people don't have. He's got nuclear weapons. They don't ever talk about that.
He was
Got
president for
nuclear
4 years,
weapons.
Kamala.
Nobody ever thinks about that.
And didn't eat his
eventually,
lunch.
maybe he'll use them, and maybe
What do you mean
he
he would
hasn't
do
been
it
that
now?
threatening. But he does have that, something we don't even like to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about it. But just so you understand, they sent her to negotiate peace before this war started. 3 days later, he went in and he started the war because everything they said was weak and stupid. They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She was the emissary. They sent her in to negotiate with Zelensky and Putin, and she did. And the war started 3 days later. And that's the kind of talent we have with her. She's worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. But let me tell you something. She is a horrible negotiator. They sent her in to negotiate. As soon as they left, Putin did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring up something. You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Vice President Harris, have you ever met Vladimir Putin? Can you clarify tonight?
Yet again, I said it at the beginning of the debate, you're going to hear a bunch of lies coming from this fellow. And that is another one. When I went to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5 times. The reality is it has been about standing as America always should, as a leader upholding international rules and norms, as a leader who shows strength, understanding that the alliances we have around the world are dependent on our ability to look out for our friends and not favor our enemies because you adore strongmen instead of caring about democracy. And that is very much what is at stake here. The President of the United States is commander-in-chief, and the American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of this debate.
Biden. That's fine.
I wanted to move on to Afghanistan.
Stoltenberg said Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever seen. He got these countries, the 28 countries at the time, to pay up. He said, I've never seen. He's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen. For years, we were paying almost all of NATO. We were being ripped off by European nations, both on trade and on NATO. I got them to pay up by saying one of the statements you made before. If you don't pay, we're not going to protect you. Otherwise, we would have never gotten it. He said it was one of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen done.
Thank you. I want to turn to Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of the debate, and we witnessed a poignant moment today on Capitol Hill, honoring the soldiers who died in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan.
They didn't even show up to Arlington Cemetery.
Do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
You should.
Well, I will tell you, I agree with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's
Trump was going to
taxpayers are
before
not
COVID.
paying the $300 million a day. We were paying for that endless war. And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any
You're
war
right.
zone around
But
the
you
world.
also
The first
left
time
how
this
many American
century.
citizens over there
But let's
stranded.
understand how we got to where
And now
we
girls
are.
can't go to school.
Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated
People can't go
one
to
of
church
the
over there
weakest
anymore.
deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker.
freedom's gone.
Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down. He bypassed the Afghan
Still in
government.
Gaza.
He
Still in
negotiated directly with a
Afghanistan.
terrorist organization called the Taliban. The negotiation involved the Taliban getting 5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this, and the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place of storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we honor the importance of American diplomacy, where we invite and receive respected world leaders. And this former president, as president, invited them to Camp David because he does not, again, appreciate the role and
By the way,
responsibility
she said that she met with Putin. She
of the
never did.
President
Not
of the
one time.
United States to be commander-in-chief with a
hope
level
Trump
of
calls out the
respect.
moderators to
And
their
this gets
face.
back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response to her saying that you began the negotiations with the Taliban.
So, if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, you know, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems. And he said, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo. It was a very good agreement. The reason it was good, it was we were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish, they blew it. The agreement said you have to do this, and they didn't do it. They didn't do it. The agreement was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move on.
And these people did the worst withdrawal and, in my opinion, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump, thank you. I want to move on now to race and politics in this country. Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black.
This is a
and now she wants to
question?
be known as black. I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight.
This is a
Why do you
question you
believe
came
it's
up with?
appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't
Racial,
care.
I can identify as black.
You make a big deal out of something. I couldn't
Nobody
care
cares.
less.
What kind
Whatever
of a
she wants to
question
be
is
okay
that?
with me.
But those were your words, so I'm
I
asking.
don't know. I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
Hey, actually answer that question.
I think it's, I mean, honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people.
Where's the fact check on that?
You know, I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in
this is a
common than what
question.
separates
This
us,
is a
and we don't
legit
want
question right now.
this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember,
This is a legit
how
question
Donald
that's
Trump started.
happening?
He was a land. He owned land. He owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent property to black families. Let's remember, this is the same individual who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5. Took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first black president of the United States. And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this, want someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country. We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time.
What did Joe Biden say?
Tell me,
you don't vote for me, you ain't black.
can we please just have discourse about
he didn't want to send his kids to a concrete jungle, to a racist jungle,
and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people?
Trump blew it, though.
Knowing that regardless
that was his whole
of people's color or the language their grandmother speaks, we all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your 3rd time.
This is the most divisive presidency in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country. And they come up with things like what she just said. Going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park 5, they admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest economies in the history of the world, and I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying our economy. They have no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman, she says. She is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had, a horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad, and she can't get away with that.
Thank you. Your time is up,
I want to respond to that, though. I want to just respond briefly. Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country. One who believes in what is possible, one who brings a sense of optimism about what we can do instead of always disparaging the American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans.
Well, then talk about it. You haven't talked about a plan all night long.
I have a plan.
You didn't have a plan until 4 hours ago?
$50,000 tax deduction.
When you copy and paste it from the Biden's website to yours?
Their innovation, their ideas, their hard work. I have a plan,
the same
$6,000 for young families for the first year of your child's life to help you in that most critical stage of your child's development. I have a plan that is about allowing people to be able to pursue what has been fleeting in terms of the American dream by offering a help with down payment of $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. That's the kind of conversation, I believe, David, that people really want tonight, as opposed to a conversation that is constantly about belittling and name-calling. Let's turn the page.
Vice President
and move
Harris,
forward.
thank you. Let's turn to policy. Let's turn back
we
to
have
policy.
to move on. President Trump.
Let's turn to policy, please.
She has a plan to defund the police. She has a plan to confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
she
we
has
do
a
have to
plan
move on to
not
other
allow
issues.
fracking in Pennsylvania or
Trump,
anywhere else.
Okay.
That's
you,
what her
President.
plan is until just recently.
I just need
Lindsay,
to
go ahead.
respond
President
because
Trump,
the
President
former
Trump.
president has said
No, I'm
something
sorry.
twice that I need to
No,
respond to.
I'm sorry. We're going to move on, Vice President Harris. President Trump, this is now your third time running for president. You have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better. Correct. Last month, you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan, and can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today. And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things, we're going to do it, and we're going to replace it. But remember this. I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came up. They wouldn't vote for it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, never going to be great, or do I let it rot? And I felt I had an obligation, even though politically it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in that administration. We read about the bad ones. We had some real bad ones, too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing. But it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan?
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president right now. But if we come up with something, I would only change it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive. And there are concepts and options we have to do that. And you'll be hearing about it in the not-too-distant future.
Vice President Harris, in 2017, you supported Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run health care system. 2 years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private health care options.
Bad
but
answer from
what
him.
we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous lying about this stuff.
That's not a lie.
As it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, just look at the history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. I was a senator at the time when I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up for a vote in the United States Senate. And the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged.
John McCain great. He was a hero.
As being, you don't like him, you said at the time, because he got caught. He was an American hero. The late, great John McCain, I will never forget that night, walked onto the Senate floor and said, no, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan. And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions.
That's not true.
I don't have to tell people watching tonight. You remember what that was like?
Remove the ability for me to pay for health insurance.
Remember when an insurance company could deny?
I physically can't afford it.
If a child had asthma,
the government says I make too much money.
If someone was a breast cancer survivor, if
work 80 hours
a
a week,
grandparent had diabetes.
2 jobs, can't afford health insurance.
And thankfully, as I've been vice president, and we, over the last 4 years, have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed, for the first time, Medicare to negotiate drug prices.
That's actually probably why I owe money, is because I don't have health insurance. You, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate I physically can't afford
drug prices. He never did.
Bills.
We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it.
Vice President Harris,
in terms of where Donald Trump stands on that.
I want to move to an issue that's important for a lot of...
You made a mistake. Number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going. And you know what? We can do much better than Obamacare, much less money. But she won't improve private insurance for people, private medical insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to give. People are paying privately for insurance that have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation that you need immediately.
President Trump, thank you. We have another issue that we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans, in particular younger voters, and that's climate change. President Trump, with regard to the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat.
It is not
the question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said that climate change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or is being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as vice president over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been vice president. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories around the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs.
I don't want factories around the world. I want factories in America.
And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also know that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles. It includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
That didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. It's going, they're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico.
She said all
in
around
many
the world,
cases owned by
which
China.
Is not here in
they're
America.
building
That's
these
around the
massive
world.
plants, and
Not
they
here.
think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people.
That's correct.
What they have given to China is unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife?
No surprise.
Why did he get? Why did she pay him $3.5 million?
Cars run on water.
This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with closing statements from both of our candidates. An historic night, this ABC News president.
Oh boy, this has been interesting. I feel like Trump has really missed some points. I feel like the moderators are trash. Orange man bad has pretty much been the whole thing. Am I wrong? Have they fact-checked her one time? I don't think they have. I don't think they fact-checked her one time. See, it makes sense. One thing China's actually doing right. Now, granted, they're probably having 10-year-olds work the factory, but... Kamala, by the way, Kamala definitely would try to take away firearms. I don't know if she would be, I don't know if she'd be good at it, like be able to accomplish it, but she definitely would try. Yeah, they haven't. Yeah, I didn't think so. Trump starts to hit Kamala. Hey, we got to move on. We want to move on here. I still feel like the moderators are trying to debate him. Like, they are trying to protect her so bad. She talked about personal insults, and yet she keeps going after him with personal insults. It's just, it's the greatest. And it's funny that the moderators got the fact check wrong on late-term abortion. Twice. They missed it twice. I missed the old governor saying it and the statistics that I pulled up. Kamala Harris takes no responsibility for the Afghanistan withdrawal, but she was the last person in the room, according to her. Those were her words. She's the last person in the room. Still U.S. citizens trapped over there. And they have no desire to get them out. The scariest words you can ever hear is, I'm from the government, I'm coming to save you. And that's what Kamala's saying. But what's funny is, she's saying she's going to save you from herself. So. It has been a cluster of a debate. All of Kamala Harris's plan has been to get people to hate Trump, which 85% of people have already made up their mind about Trump, according to the poll that just came out. I don't believe that Kamala Harris is a gun owner, by the way. That's full of crap. And Kamala has still not answered a single question. She's so criminy. Oh, here we go.
Closing statements, and Vice President Harris, we begin with you.
So I think you've heard tonight two very different visions for our country.
That's true. She's been more human than she showed up and stayed alive.
One that is focused on the future, and the other that is focused on the past, and an attempt to take us backward. But we're not going back. And I do believe that the American people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us. And we can chart a new way forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan, understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together that is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was the DA, I was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client
What
the
she does to
people.
a baby's body is not her
And I'll
right.
tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever
you
asked
couldn't
them,
because that's
are you
illegal.
okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now.
No,
Someone
that's
who
not.
cares about you and is not putting
We don't need a
themselves
hug.
first.
We need somebody
I intend to be a
tough and
president
strong.
for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump?
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why
Finally.
hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it, and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like we're not going to frack. We're not going to take fossil fuel. We're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that, and within 1 year, they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for
Tweets
it.
from the White House.
We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question. Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world, they're laughed. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President Trump, thank you. And that is our ABC News presidential debate from here in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center. I'm Lindsay Davis.
And I'm David Muir. Thank you for watching here in the U.S. and all over the world, and from all of us here at ABC News. Good night.
Well, that was certainly something. Was certainly something. I will say, it was an hour and a half that did absolutely nothing for either candidate, which is a win for Donald Trump. Because she's already starting to decline, and she didn't do anything to go up better. So, she still didn't answer a question. Nobody won. It was she literally had the moderators on her side and didn't win the debate. But does that mean she loses the debate? I don't know. It wasn't a good one. Yikes. I think it would have really helped him had he gone after the moderators. I think it would have really, really helped him to go after the moderators. Anywho.